Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home. I'm Colleen Pilar, and this is where pet professionals come for honest conversations about what it really takes to show up for yourself while serving the animals you love. If you've ever felt caught between compassion and exhaustion, you're in the right place. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your inner wisdom and rediscover the joy that brought you to this work. Make sure to join my email community at colleenpilar.com for gentle, practical insights designed specifically for pet professionals. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Kim Brophey, who is the owner of Family Dog Mediation and the developer of the LEGS model. Hi, Kim. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, Colleen. It's really good to see you.
So I just said the LEGS model as if everyone knows what it means, which of course everyone knows what it means, but just in case someone doesn't, what's a LEGS model again?
So, nutshell, every animal has a phenotype. What is a phenotype? Combination of nature and nurture, right? So legs just gives us a way to account for the gazillion things that go into each individual's phenotype. And therefore, for those of us who work with dogs, what we end up looking at the products of their behavior, which is their genetics. That's the G part of the legs. So that then gets qualified by the other factors of every individual's nurture. So their learning, their environment, their individual personality, circumstances, health, age, sex, disease, nutrition, injury, disability, all that good stuff. So we all know that there's a million things that can influence a dog's behavior. Legs gives us a way just to make sure we don't lose track of those things. Because in some funny ways, we've kind of treated dogs like they're the exception to some of natural law. So we forget that they have a natural history as a species. We forget that they have behavioral ecology. We forget that genetics are also part of the puzzle for them, like they are for other species of animals. And so it's just kind of important that we have some kind of a practical model to talk about all that overwhelming stuff. And so that's what LEGS is: learning, environment, genetics, and self.
Perfect. Thank you. And I love a good acronym, especially one that forms a word. I do
Yeah,
appreciate when it forms a
it's
word because
easier
it's
to
easier for
remember.
me to remember the word.
Yeah.
But I am a person who has always felt that I've had disorganized thinking, like that thoughts are related and connected and all sorts of stuff, but they're not sorted. And to have a model that gives me buckets of information, okay, here's what to look at here, and here's what to look at for this. It's so helpful to me in so many facets of my life, in so many areas. So hooray, thank you for sorting that out, because otherwise I would be looking at, learning right next to environment, right next to genetics, and then coming back to learning and, not necessarily developing the relationship between these in a systematic or organized way to come up with the most helpful outcomes.
Yeah, I think actually it's funny I say that 'cause my brain kind of naturally does murder boarding, right? It's just and then, and there's all these strings connecting to all the other strings, but then I can lose track of them because there's so many moving parts and they all kind of connect with each other at some point in time. And so in some ways, legs was kind of initially like a selfish endeavor for me because I was doing this is before we had Google. It tells you I'm aging myself here, but so I was doing all this research when my son was born. Um, uh, Something about my client load at the time made me start digging more. And then as my son started going to school, even his first few experiences with babysitters or with some after school programs and things like that, the things that people were telling me about my son's behavior, I was like, well, that's a perfectly normal thing for a 3-year-old boy to be doing or investigating or whatever, or have trouble sitting still for extended periods of time and things like that. And I started really seeing the overlap. And so it sent me down this probably for to some degree unhealthy obsessive research path where I had stacks of papers and books on my bedside table and I was color coding everything and trying to create some order out of the chaos as I was kind of digging into all these different disciplines to try to understand what's happening to dogs and what's happening to kids and how do we talk about this. And so over some time, the color coding system started getting distilled and then better organized. And then, realizing, wow, this actually overlaps perfectly with the concept of a phenotype. The problem is a phenotype still doesn't tell us how to proceed. Like, what do we need to remember to look at? The rocks we need to look under, kind of thing. And so legs became a way that I could talk about it with other people. I could, share these things with my colleagues and with my clients, and I could kind of make heads or tails of it. I could break it down if like something was happening with the dog and the client's like, well, this is a training issue. I could actually like show them, actually, this is an incompatibility between the E and the G for this dog. The environment isn't fitting the genetics and blah, blah, blah. And that's why he's struggling. And that's why you're struggling. It's not an L issue at all. And they were like, oh, it made things kind of more practical, to apply. So it's been fun, but it also, like, very much, as I said, a selfish endeavor, a result of an ADHD brain.
Which is where some of the miracles occur,
Yeah,
that when people find a solution for themselves and then find a way to communicate and share it with others, then we all go, "Wow, I wish I'd thought of that," because it does serve a need. It serves this ability to make something easier for us, which across the board, it could be anything, from the sticky glue of a Post-it note to
yeah,
to, a whole model where it allows you to notice what you want to be exploring and how they relate.
yeah.
So that is so cool. Um, and presumably you didn't grow up imagining you were going to develop a new model for looking at canine behavior. I'm guessing. So I do love to ask my guests, when you were 10, what did you think you were going to do when you grew up?
It's a really fun, interesting story. So, like, I love to kind of paint this picture because it's how I got here, but I didn't think it would go this way. When I was a kid, I was a nature nerd. So, like, I wouldn't read the fiction summer reading books. I would read National Geographic and the encyclopedia. I was always like, I grew up in Atlanta, so there was only so much nature available, but like wherever it was, I found it. I was in the creeks and, playing with the crawdads and the salamanders and the snakes and the whatever else I could find, and was constantly begging my parents to get me out into nature. And frankly, my love affair with dogs probably started as a matter of convenience, and that like they were the species that was really accessible to me to hang out with and study. And the dogs were loose in Atlanta at the time. So like there was a lot to discover about them. And I just fell in love with having these beasts at my feet, if you will. I was just enamored with them, and revered them. And so, like, I did not think that would turn into dog training. I didn't like the dog training experiences that I had when I was a kid. This was when like there really wasn't like a lot of pet dog trainers. Like it was more like you took your dog to a dog training class because it was like fun or something or a hobby or interesting or just to teach them a couple skills, but people didn't need it the way that they like need it today. And those experiences I had, were not awesome. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I kind of thought that I would work with animals in some capacity. I would look at, zookeepers and think that that was cool. I also wanted to be a cowgirl. I wanted to be out on the ranches, just riding horses through the prairies and sleeping under the stars. And then, as I got a little older, I was like, I want to save the world and I'll join Greenpeace and like all these things. And I think I've just been a nature nerd, like at heart. And again, I think the dog path is just what opened up for me. It's what was at my fingertips, and, so in many ways, I'm still kind of finding I'm having the same feelings and thoughts and goals that I did when I was 10. I used to go into a local dime store actually in Atlanta, and they had all of these pets, in cages and stuff. And I was writing letters to like state officials and organizations about the bad welfare of these animals that were, in these cages and how concerned I was about that. And so looking back, I think it was always in me to revere nature and then have concerns about humans' interruptions of it. And so, in many ways, everything I'm doing is just kind of like an evolution of that same childhood feeling.
That's so cool. So take me along the path then. So at the end of high school, what?
So I went to Warren Wilson College here in Western North Carolina, which I was I didn't, again, go into it thinking I'd end up majoring in, applied ethology, but they have a, integrative studies program there. And so if someone wanted to, say, create kind of like a specialized focus for their degree that wasn't available specifically, and of course, at the time, there was no, applied ethology or, relationship between human and animal behavior kind of program. So some of my peers that did the same program did things like sustainable agriculture, because they had all the different kinds of courses you could pull from to compose it. So essentially, I did that with applied ethology. So I did a series of the core courses. I had to kind of like submit and apply to do this program by organizing what courses I would take, what independent studies I would do, blah blah blah, and then you have to have a whole senior thesis. But it was really cool because it gave me an opportunity to study the relationship between humans and animals, and particularly humans and dogs, historically, evolutionarily, natural selection, artificial selection, the many capacities of our relationship. As a Lassie fan, right, growing up, like I was like, gosh, dogs can tell you Timmy's in the well, and I believed it, and so I went out and got a herding dog as soon as I went to college, and I was like, they are that smart. You can talk to them like that. And yeah, so I didn't know that I would end up turning it into something specific with dogs, but then the more I got into my college education at Warren Wilson and I, realized what that program offered, I got really excited, and very ambitious about it. And at first I thought I would just go into service and therapy dog training because that was kind of like where the action was in
Mhm.
1998, 99, right? Like that's where the new stuff was coming out, the
Yeah.
Delta Society and Pet Partners, and they were kind of leading the conversation on like actual learning science and things like that. And um so I those were the first conferences I went to. I think I went to my first APDT conference in like 99, maybe 2000. And then the field of behavior consulting, opened up, and then I went down that road, and the rest, I guess, is history.
The rest is history. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think my first APDT conference was also 99.
Really?
Yeah.
Wasn't
And
it
I
in
was
Houston
so
or something?
excited. Even at the time, I couldn't tell you which city, like, people would be like, "Didn't we see each other and where?" And I'm like, "I saw an airport and a
In a
hotel."
hotel. Right. That's all I remember.
I don't know what city we were in. There was an airport and a hotel, and then I spent days in hallways talking to people about dogs.
Yeah. It's
But
funny
yeah, it
they
might
they
have been Houston, but and
they
I
advertise
didn't get
for.
the T-shirts and keep them from year to year, so I didn't have an anchor to
Yeah, right.
to remind me of
They
what
they always
airport or what hotel.
advertise all these really fun things that you could go do in these cities, and I'm like, "Who does them?" Like, I never leave the hotel. I feel like I don't see the light of day for, like, 4 days during conferences.
Yeah. At the time, I couldn't afford anything extra, like, it was a big enough
Right.
stretch to even
Yeah,
get to a conference and pay
yeah.
for the airplane and the hotel and the conference that, like, even things that were, like, in the hotel, I typically wasn't even paying for the extra whatever
Yeah,
because
yeah.
but I was so happy to be there because it was so difficult to find quality education,
Mm.
that we traveled for, weekend workshops and we traveled for conferences because there was, online courses. Huh, what a
I
dream.
know.
Who knew? Um, we had no idea that the world was gonna open up in such powerful ways, but it did, hooray, and education is so much more accessible now and and higher quality over time. It's so interesting to, like, think about things that were shocking and new to me back then
Mhm,
that are just basic accepted information now and are
mhm,
being built upon,
mhm.
um, which which is exciting. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
So so that the behavior consulting piece. So you started into you graduated with this degree, you were interested in the degree and the way to do this. Did you just like start a dog training business or did you have some other vision in mind like right after college?
So, when I first got out of college, my vision, because again, the field of behavior consulting was kind of like just emerging. And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." But I also really liked the idea of doing the service and therapy stuff because, again, that's kind of where I
Mm.
started. That was like my first
Yeah.
exposure to a lot of the education. And so, I had, as part of my, college education, designed some programs for, like, at-risk youth, for instance. So, one of my first jobs out of college was implementing, a program in a daycare and then a foster program, a local foster, organization, for teenagers. And so they allowed me to introduce a animal therapy program, in their facilities, and then it was probably about a year and a maybe 2 years into that, then I saw an article in a paper that was hiring for the executive director of a new no-kill animal sanctuary that was gonna be opening in Western North Carolina, very well funded with a bunch of big-hearted, fabulous folks that didn't know anything about, behavior, welfare, all of that kind of stuff, nor did they have a big budget. And I was like, I actually have a degree in a field where they don't really even exist. I will take pennies on the dollar if you let me have the opportunity to become the executive director of this organization, which meant I got, dropped into the deep end of the pool, started doing everything from public speaking for the organization to writing all of the materials, designing all the programs, hiring all of that stuff, evaluating dogs from the kill shelter, bringing them to our facility, managing play groups and interactions, placing them in homes, all of that good stuff. And it was a wonderful experience. But then, reality hits when you're getting paid $17,000 a year.
Mhm.
So, I ended up actually going, I started my own behavior consulting company while I was still at that job and then ended up transitioning into that full time.
When approximately was that you transitioned into behavior consulting full time?
Probably about 21. Sorry, 2001. Yeah.
I do that too, where, like,
Yeah.
2001 and 21, like,
Oh, and I'm
that
numbers, like,
makes sense.
I've realized I have that, dyscalculia. I'm so bad with numbers.
Mhm.
Everyone always makes fun of me because sometimes I can't even do 2 plus 2, but, um and then at the time too, there was some really interesting stuff going on regionally that was cool to just be involved in. So, we had a number of really problematic no-kill shelters in the area at the time that were actually hoarding cases, and where we had like 500 dogs in a local warehouse kind of thing. We kept like
Wow.
12 dogs at our facility at a time. So we focused on like, high turnover, really quality programming. So it's not like a lot of what people think about when they're thinking about no kills today. But this particular facility was really in trouble. And at the time, the state veterinarian, who was, evaluating all these different facilities, they would just talk to us about what was going on and their concerns, blah, blah, blah. And so we ended up actually getting involved on a state level. Um, I say we, but it was myself. They asked me to come as a consultant because behavior consultants weren't even really a thing, right? And so
Mhm.
people that had a kind of any level of education at that time were
Yeah.
were really rare. So they had me come and consult with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture Veterinary Division, and I got to help rewrite the Animal Welfare Act for the state about long-term confinement, and what were the needs of animals in captivity when they were kenneled. What are the kinds of provisions that they required, et cetera. That was my first contact point with Ray Coppinger, who I would become friends with years later.
Mhm.
I wrote to him and he actually wrote me back and sent me some papers and articles on various things. And so that was just kind of a fun experience early on in my career.
What a cool experience. I had no idea about that, in your history and what powerful ripples have come from that. To be somebody who was able to take part in writing the Animal Welfare Act for your
Yeah,
state and, like,
yeah,
that makes a difference in animals' lives every single day that
yeah,
that you were involved in that, so
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That's amazing.
Think it's been revised probably numerous times ever since, and enforcement's always an issue, and interpretation's always an issue, and, it's not like we still don't have a lot of trouble here in the state when it comes to those things, but it's nice even just when you get people thinking about stuff, like, "Oh, you can't just stick a dog in a kennel for 6 months and call it good." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do need to be open to revising things and,
Mhm,
having
mhm.
having updates to things, but we do we need both. We need to be able to, like, plant our feet somewhere and say, "This is what we've agreed,"
Mhm.
and then we'll revisit.
Mhm.
But to have some common ground, and so to have taken part in the writing of that is amazing. Cool.
Mm.
I like to ask all
Fun.
of my guests to share some words that have meaning for them, and the words you shared are "be kind." Tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about why you chose those words.
So, I feel like humans always have a bias towards their own lens, and for human psychology, right? Like we literally experience the threat of our belief systems as like a threat that is like a threat of death, you know. And so it's humans have always had trouble in interacting with others that they disagree with, who they don't understand, those that challenge that belief system and make them feel uncomfortable or threatened. But the scope that has been enabled of that type of othering in modern times between humans, that's been made available through the internet and social media and things like that, has just it's exemplified, and exponentially increased, I think, the harm that we're able to do to others that we're not necessarily even aware of, by things we say and do, and, the words that we choose. And, one of my favorite books is The Four Agreements, and, he talks about, having the integrity of your word, and that starts in your thinking and how you think about yourself and others, and then it goes out into the world and things we choose to say to other people and do. And the idea being that we're casting spells, if you will, not literally, of course, but that there's ripples, that we
Yeah.
could say something to someone today that haunts them for years. And I have been on the receiving end of things, and I'm sure I have unwittingly been on the giving end of those things as well. And I think, people might say, well, it's just silly to say something like be kind. But I think it's so important that we give people the benefit of the doubt in the same way, especially as dog people, right? Like we give
Mhm.
dogs the benefit of the doubt. Like we love dogs and we're like, "Oh, what's going on for you, buddy?" Like what's happening for you there? And what's going on with your legs? What happened with your learning? What's going on in your environment? What's going on with your genetics or your internal conditions? Maybe you're not feeling well. Maybe you're on a new medication. Maybe you're hungry, whatever. And we just don't tend to reflexively give people that benefit of the doubt with a spirit of generosity. And I personally have found that transformative in my life, personally and professionally. And I feel like when we choose to just be kind, it can be transcending on so many levels to what is then enabled after that. And so for me, um, it's be kind. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really a a profound and important concept that is also so basic that it can feel like we don't need to say it. But
Right.
we do need to say it because there's a lot of systems in place that are encouraging less than kind behavior.
Yeah.
And as humans, we have some tendencies, with the negativity bias to notice what's wrong before we
Yeah.
notice what's right.
Mhm.
So we can be less than kind unintentionally, and we can be less than kind intentionally, and both are risky.
Mm.
Um, so be kind it's a nice guidepost. Is it something like from the perspective of like these words? Are these words that you hold close to you or words that when you signed up to do a podcast and I said, give me some words, you were like, like so for my mother, be kind is one of her biggies. Like she'll say it like,
Mhm.
oh, be kind, be kind, be kind, be kind, be kind. We could emblazon that on a wall and she wouldn't even notice because it's just such a part of her vocabulary. So that I guess is the question because it's such a my mom phrased.
Yeah.
Um, is it for you? Are those words as words present in your life in a way, in your thinking, or is it just a stance?
Yeah, I have a more, not G-rated version, "Don't be a boop," that is actually, like, the one that I
That's the
echo.
one that goes through your head?
Yep, that's the one that goes through my head, and so when I'm actually editing it for, public consumption, I tend to replace it with "Be kind." But, we actually have a sign, in our house that we got years ago when the kids were in middle school, and Lord knows it's hard for middle schoolers to be kind, and we bought it because it says, "Don't be a boop," and we put it in our house, and our whole family lives by it. I raised my kids on the 4 agreements, and, that is one of those things that we live by as a family rule, is you can have all kinds of feelings and opinions and disagreements and needs and all these things, but you have a choice about how you communicate those things and how you
Mhm.
conduct yourself and how you are treating the person as the receiver of that information. Um, and I just think the world needs it more than ever. I think we are so into polarized positions that just become sharper with a bigger gap between through, like, again, online, social media and stuff like that. I think it's really infected the dog world. You think about the mental health crisis that modern people are experiencing, and then fields like ours that are so prone to burnout, and we have so much
Yeah.
compassion fatigue, and then we're running our own small businesses, so we're wearing 10,000 hats and burning the candle on both ends and working through weekends just to make sure that we can keep doing what we love, and then it just takes one
And for
person.
$17,000 a year.
Right,
Like
right, right.
like
Exactly. Right, right. Takes one person just not thinking about the power, of their behavior and their words, and, you know, I I I had a particular experience about 4 years ago, maybe? Yeah, about 4 years ago in the pet dog industry where I got bullied. I became the target. The target rotates in the pet dog world at any given time, or multiple targets. And the group of people decided they didn't like what Kim Brophey had to say, and she was a fraud. So they decided I was lying about my education and all these things. So they called up my college and tried to find out if I
Oh, wow.
actually went there. Made an ethics report to one of my certifying organizations because, my name when I was in college before I got married was different. My last name was different. So they had a hard time finding Kim Brophey because Kim Brophey didn't go there. Kim Bellows went there, that kind of stuff. But the treatment that I got is they all ganged up with each other and were saying these horrible things. And then people were sending me screenshots of these horrible things and calling me an idiot. And I didn't even know these people. Um, I was shocked the effect that it had on me
Mhm.
psychologically and emotionally. And it was such a jarring moment to realize the invisible to us effects as the sender,
Mhm.
right? To the receivers of that stuff out there. And that you may not even call them by name. You may call them by group. You may call them by belief system. You may call them by organization, by, preference for one thing or another. And yet the damage can be the same,
Yeah.
and, we're all ultimately animals. We forget that. We forget that we are animals. We like this human exceptionalism that we've adopted. But the reality is that, we're dogs in different fur. We're just animals. Dogs are animals, and we all deserve that same kind of reverence,
Mhm.
uh, that, little kid me had for all those other critters out there that were just kinda innocently plugging along doing their best.
I'm participating in a group that's developing support groups for animal welfare workers,
Mm.
and so it's a 10-week program, and week 2, which I had just ran a session on this week, was "You are an animal too." That's
Mhm.
the theme. Like noticing some of the just physiological experiences that we have and,
Mhm.
our sympathetic and parasympathetic systems and all of these things that we like to just kind of be in our brains and be thinking and evolved. But the reality is, oh dear, hate to break it to you, you're an animal too.
Yeah.
Um, and the gift for our community is we have so much education and learning about supporting animals that when we are able to turn the focus toward ourselves, there
Mm.
actually are skills already developed over years of experience that can be so effective. But it's amazing how hard it can be to encourage people to use those skills
Yeah.
on themselves or on their fellow species members, at times, to recognize, like, we really are all just doing our best and we're all trying, but for various reasons, some of our behavior leaves something to be desired.
Yeah.
Let's notice that and, make what changes we can. And we're all going to fall down from time to time too, like.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, realizing the context of, like, where we are as a species and a planet right now, like, um, we don't talk about this on a wide scale in society, because, frankly, there's too many people profiting on about not talking about it, and, there are things that are, so far off of our radar, but, being animals since our departure from being hunter gatherers and since the adoption of agriculture and then moving into the Anthropocene and the Industrial Revolution and then the technology, revolution, like the starting in the late 80s and 90s and stuff, we are experiencing what modern eco-psychologists are describing as evolutionary mismatch. And there's a tremendous amount of really cool research out there on that. But it explains so much of what we're experiencing. And we're like, why do I feel uniquely broken? Why do I feel so incredibly lonely? Why can't I find some community or purpose that feels valuable and essential? Why am I having such like unmanageable anxiety? And frankly, through that lens of you're an animal, just like any other species, you have an ecology that's specific to your species. We departed from that ecology and we've been successful in some ways while our welfare has been significantly compromised in others. Same as dogs, like, right? They have better health, they have better nutrition, things like that, shelter, et cetera, than they did, but they've lost so much agency and purpose and connection and fulfillment and meaning. And we're kind of going through the same thing that they are as a species. And there's such an opportunity for compassion of this shared boat we're all in
Mhm.
and opportunities to find our feet together, cracking open the little parts of ourselves and our lives and our experiences that reconnect us back with that ecology and make us feel whole again. And that can sound Pollyanna, but it's hard as anything science. And so I get so much self-care out of remembering to look at things through that lens and be like, "Yeah, Kim, spending 8 hours a day behind a computer is not natural." And it's not a shock that you would be kind of irritable by the end of it some days and that you just get exasperated and overstimulated and you don't have bandwidth left and stuff. Whereas we're all thinking like we're supposed to be able to do all the things all the time, say all the right things, do all the right things, show up for all of it, remember to pay our taxes and our bills and, download this app and update this credit card. And like, it's just a never ending list of things that our brains were not biologically designed to handle. So if
Mhm.
any one of us are feeling at the end of that rope, it's good to be like, yeah, well, join a club. We all are. Hence, be kind. you know?
Yes. Be
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. So, if I had a magic wand and I could give it to you and you would grant us a wish or give us a blessing for pet professionals out there, what would you use it for?
Mm. More opportunities to be. And what I mean by that is it is so hard for a person to go outside in nature, surrounding yourself by with all of the sensory signals that your bodies and brains were designed to receive as indications that all is well and right in the world, right? Um, It's so hard to find those places because there's people everywhere and there's cars everywhere. There's all of this stuff wherever we go, and even when we go out hiking in the woods or camping, there's people, and, like, it's so hard to find a place where we feel safe enough to kind of be animals and feel like the door, whether real or just figurative, kind of closes behind us, and we're alone, maybe just with a dog or another person that we can share silence with, but we stop talking. We stop analyzing. We don't use our phones. We listen to the birds. We feel the earth under us. We experience the wind and all of the smells because, like, every animal out there, as part of their daily life, has periods of time where they are just being, and
Mhm.
there's such a rejuvenating, regenerating element, benefit to all of that, and we don't allow ourselves to do it. Even when we're out in nature, we're often doing, or, still talking or checking our phone or wondering what that guy over there is doing. And, so if I could grant that magic wish, and this is actually something we're trying to figure out how to develop within the legs community right now, the idea of a space that you could go into that we could then scale and have in every city, where it would be like a natural space, like a sniff spot, but much more deliberate, not someone's backyard. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I run a sniff spot and it's in someone's backyard, I'm still feeling a little bit squirrely, like I feel like I'm in someone's property. So something that feels like I'm going in, it's my hour, the door locks behind me, I know I'm safe, I'm with a dog if I wanna be or not, with someone else if I wanna be or not, but I'm just here to be, to sit in this chair or on the ground, and be able to stop for a moment and just be present. It's so beneficial, and I'll have weeks that go by where I forget to do it. It's part of my routine here where I live because I have a forest on my property, and usually I will go do it at least once a day for an hour at the end of the day. But when I get really busy, like for the last couple weeks, my mom moved in and everything with us, I haven't. And I could feel the accumulating effects. And yesterday, at the end of the day, after 3 weeks without a day off and without giving myself the opportunity to do that, my mom was supposed to come over for dinner, and I said, "Mom, I am there. I'm at my line. I'm freaking out. I need to just go sit in the woods for an hour." And that's what I did. And as soon as I did, I could feel my nervous system de-escalating. It's so palpable. But we think, "Oh, that's crunchy hippie granola stuff, whatever." No, it's not. It's basic biology. We're animals.
Yeah, and it is a shame that when we're feeling stressed, the first things we give up are the things that help us most,
Yeah.
you know? So that, like, just time by yourself in the forest really mattered, and also dinner with your mom is really valuable too, like,
Which is why
and
she's
when
coming
s
tonight. Yeah.
again, when we're really busy, we're like, "Oh, sorry, too busy for dinner," all
Yeah.
of the things.
Yes.
The podcast is audio only, but one of the things I watch for in coaching calls is people's body language and physiology, and I kinda wish it wasn't audio only because when you started talking about the experience of being out in nature, you just lit up. Like, there was
Mm,
such a glow in you,
mm,
and again, that's physiology, like, it is you
mm,
even though you were only in your head, you had stepped out into the experience of that, and there was a physical effect, like, there were ramifications of that, and so I wish, there was this visual piece for people to kind of experience it, because when you were doing your magic wand wish for us, I could feel it,
mm,
and I'm sure they'll feel it with your words, but just this idea of, like, what would it be like if you took time for yourself and went out in nature with just no obligation, no distraction? Like, you're just safe, you're with a dog or a friend or, but that there's no need to do anything other than be. Allow yourself to envision that for yourself. What does that mean for you? Because um, the envisioning is lovely, but not enough. I like hoping that that plants the seed of desire enough to make you do it. Just like you had said about when you realized you were full, you were like, "No, I gotta go to the forest. Like,
mm,
it's time.
mhm.
Ding, the timer has gone off."
Yeah.
So, so
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. We will take the wish that you are granting us, and we will run with it. If people want to learn more about you and your work, Kim, how could they do that?
So a number of different places. The one is our website, so familydogmediation.com, which we're going to be redoing that website here soon. So it may look different whenever you go there than it does today, depending on when you guys are listening to this. And then also you can find me on Facebook. You can find us at Family Dog Mediation on Instagram. And there's also a bunch of stuff on YouTube and podcasts and things like that. So if people are just kind of like interested in like, who is this person? What's she talking about? What's her gig? You can just go dip your toe in the water pretty easily. Just Googling podcasts, or, you can go to our YouTube channel. There's some interesting stuff there as well. Yeah, we are also out there in person and connecting with our colleagues at conferences and all of that good stuff too. So if any of you
In
ever,
some city with some airport.
right, exactly, exactly, where you won't see the light of day in the forest.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. I'll hook all of that up in the show notes so that people can find you in all the places. I really appreciate you talking with me today. It was such a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great to see you again.
That's our conversation for today. If something we talked about resonated, I invite you to sit with it. Notice what feels true and what you want to explore further. You don't have to have it all figured out to start moving toward what matters. Whatever showed up for you today, clarity, questions, even resistance, trust that it's pointing you towards something important. For more support, join my weekly notes at colleenpilar.com. And until next time, remember, you are enough, always, just as you are.